They say the higher you rise, the harder you fall. And for Lionel Messi, the quiet boy from Rosario who conquered the football world, that fall came not with an injury, not with a defeat on the field, but with a letter, a simple letter with a government seal. It was the summer of 2013. Messi had just come off another triumphant season with Barcelona, tallying goals like a machine, lifting trophies, and further cementing his place among the footballing gods. But while the world celebrated his magic on the pitch, something darker was brewing beneath the surface, something he never saw coming. The letter arrived at his mansion in Castelldefels, a coastal suburb near Barcelona. The envelope was thin, white, unassuming. Antonella found it first, flipping through a stack of mail, bills, sponsorship requests, charity appeals. Then she stopped, her eyes catching the Spanish coat of arms. She called out for Leo, her voice hesitant. Messi came over, hair still damp from training, a towel slung over his shoulder. He glanced at the envelope, shrugged, and opened it casually. What he read made his stomach drop. It was a notice from the Spanish tax authority. Messi and his father, Jorge, were under investigation for alleged tax fraud. Specifically, the letter accused them of evading more than $4 million in taxes related to image rights earnings from 2007 to 2009. The implication? That they had used shell companies in Belize and Uruguay to obscure the true income. At first, Messi didn't even understand the accusations. "Is this a mistake?" he asked. He wasn't an accountant. He wasn't a lawyer. He played football. That was his life. But the media? The media didn't wait for an explanation. Within hours, headlines exploded across Spain and the globe. Messi accused of tax fraud faces jail time. From hero to villain, Messi's dirty millions. Overnight, he went from untouchable idol to potential criminal. And it didn't matter that he hadn't personally handled the contracts, or that he had blindly signed documents his father and legal team prepared. In the eyes of the law, and more dangerously the public, ignorance was no excuse. As reporters camped outside his home and fans took sides on social media, Messi withdrew. He stopped talking to most people, stopped posting online, stopped smiling during interviews. His passes on the pitch were still precise, his goals still brilliant, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, like the weight of the world had suddenly been dropped on his shoulders. Privately, things were even worse. Jorge Messi, his father and longtime manager, tried to shield Leo from the growing storm, but even he looked shaken. "We're going to fix this," he promised. "I'll handle it." But it wasn't that simple. Because the prosecutors were not only pursuing a fine, they were pushing for prison time, up to 22 months behind bars. In Spain, a sentence under 2 years for first-time non-violent offenses can be served on probation, but the scandal of even being sentenced was a stain that no amount of goals could wash away. Messi's team of lawyers advised him to deny wrongdoing, to argue he had no knowledge of the financial structure. But that defense came with risk. If the court didn't buy it, he could lose everything. Sponsorships were already getting nervous. Inside Nike's European office, emails were exchanged with alarming frequency. "What's our exit strategy if Messi is convicted? We need to start distancing ourselves, publicly." Meanwhile, inside Leo's home, Antonella watched him spiral into silence. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating like he used to. Every time the news came on, he changed the channel. Then one night, he said it out loud. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "I just wanted to play." And in that moment, Antonella knew. This wasn't just about money, or fame, or even jail. This was about trust, about betrayal. Because Messi, the boy who never asked for more than a ball and a goalpost, was now being painted as a mastermind in a multi-million-euro scam. And the worst part? He didn't know who to believe anymore. Was it just bad accounting, a simple oversight? Or had someone close, knowingly put his future at risk? The court date was set. Barcelona buzzed with its usual summer heat, tourists flooding the Ramblas and locals escaping to the coast. But for Messi, time moved differently, slower. He counted days not by training sessions or match days, but by how many headlines he had survived without breaking. His legal team advised him to maintain a low profile, no interviews, no comments. Let the lawyers handle everything. But that silence became deafening. In private, Leo had begun to question everything, not just the numbers, but the people around him. He had trusted his father with everything: contracts, image rights, financial decisions. It wasn't that Jorge was greedy. He was fiercely protective, the kind of man who never let strangers close, who believed the world would always try to take advantage of his son. Maybe that paranoia had pushed him to be creative. One night, Leo sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through an old photo album. It was filled with black and white pictures from Rosario, a skinny boy with long hair, chasing a ball barefoot, always smiling. His mother Celia cheering from the sidelines. Jorge, always nearby, always watching. He whispered to himself, when did it all get so complicated? Meanwhile, the Spanish media wasn't letting go. Talk shows dissected the case like it was a football match. Former players gave their opinions. Financial experts weighed in on offshore accounts and tax havens. Even rival fans found new ammunition. At away games, some crowds began chanting, "Ladrón," thief, when Messi touched the ball. And through it all, Barcelona's board remained eerily silent. Behind closed doors, executives debated whether to publicly support their golden boy. He had made the club billions. But sponsors were nervous, and UEFA had been increasing pressure on financial transparency. One misstep, one more scandal, and the club itself could face sanctions. The silence felt like betrayal. One morning, Leo asked his agent a question that left everyone in the room stunned. Should I leave Spain? The room went quiet. It wasn't an impulsive thought. For weeks, the idea had been eating at him. What if the only way to survive, not just legally but emotionally, was to walk away? To take Antonella and the kids, sell the house, and start over in England? Or even go back to Argentina, to Newell's Old Boys, the club of his childhood. But the thought of abandoning Barcelona felt like losing a limb. This was more than a club. This was home. This was where he became Messi. But homes, he was learning, could turn against you. Meanwhile, his relationship with Jorge began to crack. During one strategy meeting, Leo raised his voice, rare for him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. "You signed the contracts. You told me everything was under control." Jorge tried to explain, but the words felt hollow. "I did it for you. I was protecting you." Leo shook his head. From what? From paying taxes? From being honest? It wasn't hate. It was heartbreak. For the first time in his life, Messi began handling his own affairs. He hired a second legal opinion, brought in external auditors. He wanted to understand every document, every payment, every shell company tied to his name. And what he found only made things worse, because the truth wasn't black or white. There were contracts signed in his name without full transparency, payments routed through foreign entities, advisors who should have warned him but didn't, and a system, both legal and cultural, that made it easy to exploit loopholes, then pretend surprise when the bill came due. The prosecutors were building their case. They had documents, timelines, expert witnesses, and while they couldn't prove Messi had orchestrated the scheme, they could prove he benefited from it. And that, in Spanish law, was enough. Then came the leaks, internal emails, testimonies, even private WhatsApp messages between legal teams, all somehow made their way into the hands of tabloids. One particular leak struck Leo like a blow to the chest. A conversation between two tax officials mocking his intelligence. He probably doesn't even know how a bank works. He kicks balls. We'll make an example of him. It was never about justice. It was about making headlines. The pressure cooker was reaching its limit. That same week, Leo skipped training. An unprecedented move. Rumors swirled. Was he injured? Was he leaving Barca? Was he preparing for a plea deal? None of the above. He was at home, holding Tiago, his oldest son, in his arms, watching cartoons and pretending, for just an hour, that everything was still normal. That the world didn't think his father was a criminal. That his face wasn't on the front page of every newspaper in the country. That night, Antonella sat beside him on the balcony. They said nothing for a long time, just watched the lights over the sea. Then she asked quietly, "If this all ended tomorrow, would you still play?" He didn't answer right away. But when he finally spoke, his voice was firm. "Yes, football never betrayed me." The day of the court hearing arrived like a storm cloud, heavy and impossible to ignore. Outside the courthouse in Gava, reporters swarmed the entrance, lenses raised like rifles, waiting for a single blink from the man they once worshipped as a god. Messi emerged from the black SUV wearing a navy suit, crisp but simple. His father walked beside him, eyes set forward, jaw clenched. Antonella stayed home with the children. They had agreed not to expose the boys to this circus. But even from a distance, Tiago had asked that morning, "Dad, are you in trouble?" Messi didn't know what hurt more, the question or the fact that he didn't know how to answer it. He walked into the courtroom silently. No autographs, no smiles, just the quiet click of dress shoes echoing off the marble floor, chased by the deafening noise of 1,000 opinions being shouted outside. Inside, the prosecutor presented their case with surgical precision. They displayed charts of Messi's image rights earnings, millions from Adidas, Pepsi, Konami, and others, money funneled through offshore companies with no physical presence, existing solely on paper. They showed how those companies received payments that should have gone directly to Messi, thereby avoiding Spanish taxes. Then came the real blow. Lionel Messi signed every one of these contracts, the prosecutor declared, holding up pages filled with signatures. He cannot claim ignorance. This is not a child. This is a man responsible for his fortune. Messi sat there, hands folded, lips pressed into a thin line. He remembered signing those papers, dozens of them, every week, year after year, but never reading them, always trusting Jorge and the lawyers. Was that naive? Yes. Was it criminal? That was the question now hanging in the air. His defense attorney stood and countered. My client is a footballer. His job is not finance. His focus is the field. These companies were established and managed by professionals, his father included, who assured him everything was legal. There was a pause. If this court believes that Lionel Messi, while training 6 hours a day and playing 60 matches a year, also maintained a secret tax fraud operation, then perhaps we've forgotten who this man really is. The judge didn't flinch. Over the following days, more testimonies came. Jorge was grilled for hours, asked about contracts, tax consultants, account managers. His answers were firm, but defensive. At one point, he admitted, "Maybe I didn't understand everything either." And that, ironically, made things worse, because the court saw not just negligence, but a pattern, a network of avoidance disguised as management. Then came Messi's turn. He stood before the judge and was asked the same question, again and again. Did you know how your image rights were being managed? His answer never changed. No, I trusted my father. I played football. The room was silent for a moment after that. The judge stared at him, expression unreadable. After the hearing ended for the day, Messi returned home drained. His phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from friends, old teammates, even a few high-profile athletes offering quiet support. But none of it helped. Because no matter how many people said, "You'll be fine," they couldn't take away the fear inside him. That night, he sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a glass of water he hadn't touched. Antonella eventually joined him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "You've done nothing wrong," she whispered. "And if the world doesn't see that, we'll still be okay." But Messi didn't respond. Not because he didn't believe her, but because a part of him wondered if it was still true. Because even if he hadn't broken the law, hadn't he failed to protect what he'd built? That same week, another bomb dropped. The prosecution demanded a prison sentence for both Messi and Jorge, 21 months each. They also demanded a massive fine and back taxes, totaling over $4.1 million. The prison term shocked even his critics. Sponsors began making calls again. Internal memos were leaked. If the sentence stands even suspended, our legal cannot justify continuation of the endorsement deal. Even his own club was under pressure. Barca fans were divided. Some launched hashtags of support, Todos con Messi, while others demanded the club clean its image. In a crisis meeting, one board member was heard saying, "If he goes to prison, he cannot represent Barcelona, period." The clock was ticking. Then, like lightning in a clear sky, a lifeline appeared. Behind the scenes, Messi's legal team negotiated a deal, full repayment of the taxes owed, plus an additional fine in exchange for reducing the sentence to probation, no jail time. It wouldn't clear his name, but it would keep him out of prison. But to accept the deal, Messi would have to plead guilty. And that, for a man who lived by silence and honesty, felt like swallowing fire. He stayed up all night the day the offer came. Antonella tried to console him. Jorge remained quiet, aware that his own choices had brought them to this point. At 4:23 a.m., Messi made the call. "We take the deal." The courtroom was full, but Messi didn't look up. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't matter. The world was already watching. He stood beside his father, the judge reading aloud the terms of the agreement. Guilty, tax fraud, a suspended sentence of 21 months, a fine of over $2 million, full repayment of all taxes owed. No prison, but the stain was permanent. When the judge asked if he understood the plea, Messi nodded once. See. His voice was barely audible. By the time he stepped outside, the scene had changed. No longer a suspect, no longer a mystery. He was now, officially, a convicted criminal, albeit one without jail time. The media pounced. Headlines screamed, "Messi pleads guilty, from legend to lawbreaker. The fall of a giant." In the days that followed, the court of public opinion delivered its own verdict. Some fans stood by him. They saw a scapegoat, a man who never asked to be rich, who never wanted fame, just football. To them, Messi was the same shy boy who wept after every loss and hugged every teammate after a goal. But others weren't so forgiving. On Spanish radio, pundits tore into him. He made millions here, lived like royalty. And this is how he repays Spain? Politicians used him as an example, citing him during debates on tax reform. Rival players made snide comments in interviews. A late-night host mocked him with a skit called Messi the Accountant. Even worse was what happened overseas. Sponsorships were quietly paused. Some were canceled. One global brand removed his photo from its European homepage for a full month, citing contractual review. His team tried to downplay it, but Messi noticed. The calls came less frequently. The cameras still followed him, but the lens had changed. No longer in awe, but looking for flaws. And in the privacy of his home, something else shifted. His relationship with Jorge was strained. They still spoke. They still shared meals. But there was a silence between them now. A fragile, invisible line neither wanted to cross. Jorge had always been more than a manager. He was Leo's protector, the man who fought off agents and clubs and snakes in suits. But now, Messi couldn't ignore the truth. His protector had also become his risk. One evening, they sat in the backyard watching Thiago play with Mateo. The sun dipped behind the hills. Jorge sipped mate, quietly. Leo finally spoke. "We need to change everything." Jorge nodded. "I know." They didn't argue. They didn't cry. Just two men who had built an empire together, now realizing it was time to rebuild it differently. That summer, Messi hired a new legal team, new financial advisors. He created a direct oversight structure for all contracts. Nothing would ever be signed without his full understanding. His name would no longer be a signature rubber-stamped by someone else. He also took a bold step. He agreed to speak publicly. In an exclusive interview with a trusted journalist from Catalonia, Messi addressed the scandal for the first time. The cameras rolled. He looked directly into the lens. "I made a mistake. I trusted the wrong way. But I never tried to steal. Never." The interviewer paused. "Do you think your fans still believe in you?" Messi looked down, then up. "I hope they believe in how I play, because that's always been honest. It wasn't a perfect statement. Some critics called it too measured, not emotional enough. But for Messi, it was everything he had to give. He wasn't a man of speeches. He let his feet speak. And that's exactly what he did when the new season began. With the scandal still fresh, Messi returned to the pitch. In the first La Liga match of the season, Barcelona hosted Sevilla. The atmosphere was tense. Some fans booed, others cheered. Every time Messi touched the ball, the stadium held its breath. Then, in the 73rd minute, he received a pass at the edge of the box. A defender lunged, another closed the space. Messi paused, shifted weight to his left foot, then cut back to his right. A flick, a shimmy, a shot, goal. The stadium erupted. He didn't celebrate wildly. No finger to the sky. No sprint to the corner flag. He just looked up, not to the fans, but to the sky above, and exhaled. It wasn't about redemption. It was about release. Years later, when people look back on Lionel Messi's career, they don't speak first of the scandal. They speak of goals, hundreds of them, of passes no one else could see, of a left foot that bent the laws of physics. But for Messi, the summer of the tax trial never really disappeared. It changed him. Not the way an injury does, or a defeat in a final. Those are sharp wounds, visible, and they heal. This was different. This was slow, invisible corrosion. It chipped away at something internal, his trust in people, in systems, in the idea that playing fair would always be enough. For the public, forgiveness came in increments. His performances never faltered. If anything, he played with more fire, more determination, as if proving something not to the world, but to himself. The 2014 World Cup saw him drag Argentina to the final, and even though they lost, his brilliance was undeniable. In the seasons that followed, he broke records thought untouchable. More Ballon d'Or, more trophies, more magic. But behind the scenes, everything changed. He no longer allowed any document to be signed without a meeting. He surrounded himself with new professionals, people chosen not for loyalty, but for competence. Jorge remained part of his life, but not in the same role. Their bond was still there, but no longer at the center of Messi's machinery. There were moments, quiet ones, where the pain surfaced again. Once, during a charity visit to a children's hospital, a little girl asked him, "Is it true you went to jail?" He smiled gently and knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart," he said, "but I did something wrong, and I learned from it. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just the truth." And that's how Messi lived from then on, not to erase the past, but to transcend it. In interviews, he never blamed anyone, not the lawyers, not his father, not the media. That silence, the same silence that once made him seem distant, became a form of dignity. He could have fled. After the scandal, clubs in England and France offered staggering contracts, but he stayed, not because he owed Spain anything, but because he refused to let shame rewrite the story of who he was in Barcelona. He knew what it meant to walk into the Camp Nou and feel the roar of thousands, not just for the goals, but because, despite it all, he remained theirs. That choice, to stay, to rebuild, to own the failure and rise again, became part of his legend. In 2021, when he finally left Barcelona, it wasn't under scandal or shame, but with tears, applause, and the recognition of a man who had given everything. When he hoisted the World Cup in 2022, it wasn't just Argentina celebrating, it was the world. Because by then, Messi had become something rare, a fallen idol who chose to stand again, not with loud speeches or legal tricks, not by shifting blame, but by doing the only thing he had ever truly mastered, showing up, again and again, and letting his football speak for him. And it did. Louder than headlines, stronger than critics, deeper than the stain on a legal record. Today, when people tell his story, from Rosario to Paris, from stadiums to living rooms, they might mention the scandal, briefly, as a footnote, as something he went through but not something that defined him, because Messi was never perfect. He was human, and somehow that made his greatness feel even greater.